Mediocre at best sports podcast. Thanks for watching or listening. However it is you're supporting this show, we definitely appreciate it. Shout out to my producer Aaron Roberts out in SoCal, San Diego of Blue Vision Entertainment. He puts these podcasts for us together, so we definitely appreciate that. Going to talk NBA stuff. Russell Westbrook, now that the Thunder are eliminated from the playoffs, what will happen with them? The playoff series in round 2, my predictions for each one. Boston Celtics beat the Washington Wizards in game 1 of round 2. I do got the Wizards winning in 6 games in that series, but we'll talk about that coming up. But first, some NFL stuff. So I'm going to talk Minnesota Vikings, my draft or my reactions to their draft this 2017 season. How do I feel about it? We'll talk about that in just a few moments. And I'll also double down on the whole reaction I had to Mitch Trubisky. Not necessarily Mitch Trubisky, but the Chicago Bears and how they handled selecting Mitch Trubisky is my whole issue. Or Mitchell Trubisky, I guess is what he wants to be called now. Real quick points in the NFL. Actually, not NFL, sports in general. I do like talking sports. I think this is great. If I was to ever do anything with this, that'd be fantastic. But if not, it's all good. I like talking sports. It is what it is. I feel bad for those that were laid off at ESPN. It seems like this is happening every 6 months now, where they're just laying people off. And this most recent layoff that they had last week seems to be the most damaging. Well, not necessarily most damaging. I don't want to power rank, those that are getting let go versus others that are getting let go. Which one is worse? That's not really what we should be doing. But I guess the carnage, the amount of just faces that they let go, especially faces that you see TV personalities and journalists out there. Jason Stark, Chad Ford. I can't believe they let them go. Mark Stein even, how does that even happen? That's crazy. So the landscape of more sports media, I guess, is changing, but I hope they bounce back soon. I just don't get it, but it is what it is. Real quick points in the NFL before I get to the draft reaction to the Minnesota Vikings. Marshawn Lynch is returning to the Oakland Raiders, so that should ease the pain in the Bay Area for all the fans of Raider Nation out here that knows that they're going to go to Las Vegas eventually, but the fact that you got the hometown hero, Marshawn Lynch, with the Raiders should make things a little bit easier to go. Adrian Peterson, he's a New Orleans Saints, big ups to him. Congratulations. Wish him all the best. I've got no ill will towards him. My only issue that I ever had was how he handled returning back after the child abuse charges, everything like that. But I've already said my piece. Not going to go back down that road. Him and his agent, how they responded after that. But doubling down on the Chicago Bears, moving up from the 3rd pick to the 2nd pick in the draft to draft Mitch Trubisky. They gave up, in case you didn't know this, Chicago Bears gave up to the San Francisco 49ers. They swapped first-round picks in this year's draft. They also gave up this year and next year's 3rd-round draft pick, this year's 4th-round draft pick, all to move up one spot to the number 2 pick to draft Mitch Trubisky. 13 college career starts. Last year was his only productive year. 13 college career starts in his life, basically all through last year, and that's what you're going to move up for. You gave up. We're not talking about 6th or 7th round picks or late round project picks. You're talking about, forfeiting later to the San Francisco 49ers. You're talking about potentially impact players, now impact players, or maybe a year from now impact players, potentially, maybe all 3 even if you're lucky, that you just forfeited to the San Francisco 49ers. I don't understand why you did that. And people say, everyone's saying, the thought logic with the Chicago Bears is, they're competing with others. It's been reported that, oh my God, they're going to, they're competing with the Browns and the Chiefs and whoever else to move up because they could be going after Mitch Trubisky. Well, according to Charles Robinson, senior NFL reporter for Yahoo Sports, he tweeted out that the Bears were essentially competing with themselves, that there was no other bidders that were trying to match the asking price of the San Francisco 49ers. In fact, he also tweeted that the Niners were pitching out their offer for the number 2 pick in the draft and that no one would bite. This was a week long that they went hard to sell that pitch for the number 2 pick in the draft, and there were no biters, and it looks like the Chicago Bears were basically bidding against themselves. But the amount of pressure that you're going to put on him, because who's to say, even if he wasn't there at the number 3 pick, there's other picks in the draft you could go to. I don't understand how Deshaun Watson, after leading Clemson to a national championship, I saw the way this dude play against elite defenses, Alabama, especially at the national championship game. Isn't that what it's all about? But then later on in the offseason, we look for ways to pick dudes apart like Teddy Bridgewater. I wasn't necessarily high on Teddy Bridgewater going into his offseason before he got drafted. But I knew that the consensus was, okay, Teddy Bridgewater, he's the best quarterback in the draft. But then, he had a bad pro day. He didn't wear his gloves, and it's not good. Blake Bortles ended up being the first quarterback, I believe, in that draft. I don't understand how we try to pick apart dudes for no reason, but Patrick Mahomes would have been available. Deshaun Watson would have been available, but it is what it is. You mortgage your future for Mitch Trubisky. We'll just have to see how that works out. As far as the Minnesota Vikings and their draft and my reaction to it, I need everyone to understand, I say this all the time, I'm not here looking to be Mr. Negative. I'm not here to sell negativity. In fact, let me remind you, at the beginning of this podcast, in the offseason, before the last season started for the Minnesota Vikings, after Rick Spielman traded for Sam Bradford, after Teddy Bridgewater went down, who was it that praised Rick Spielman for that and said he will probably get Executive of the Year if this works out? It was me. During that 5-0 start, who was the person that was saying, they could be Super Bowl contenders. This looks like it could be something special. They could make a deep playoff run. It was me. So I'm not sitting here trying to find different ways to sell how I feel. I just say how it is that I feel. I don't feel that good. The free agency period has essentially worn off, and the entire draft is over with, and we still haven't answered the slot cornerback position. We've got question marks at the opposite starting defensive tackle spot beside Linval Joseph. We've still got issues across the offensive line. Now, I don't have any issue with the Minnesota Vikings trading up to get Dalvin Cook, especially in the second round. He was a first-round talent. He fell to the second round as far as off-the-field issues. And if you're going to draft guys with off-the-field issues, I would have probably gone with Joe Mixon. I mean, Cincinnati ended up drafting him at the 48th pick. But who's to say if they were going to draft him at 41, it is what it is. But Dalvin Cook possibly could have been available at the 48th spot. But it's okay. He's a first-round talent that fell in the second round. I would have went Joe Mixon. But I don't mind Dalvin Cook because he's elusive. He sounds a little bit like Adrian Peterson, but the one difference is he's not looking to make the big home run play. He's capable of making a big home run play, but he's not looking to do that. Adrian Peterson, to me, in the last couple of years, was looking to make the home run play every single play, which is what Andrew Kramer said, who I believe he's now with the Star Tribune, Minnesota Star Tribune, formerly of 1500 ESPN. He gave the phrase famine, famine, feast, where Adrian Peterson, he's trying to look for the big play every single play. And what's happening is he's dancing in the backfield, trying to make something happen. The defense gets to him. He loses a yard here, gets a 1-yard gain here, maybe 2 here. And then he busts off a 70-yard run, and there's your feast. And then his average goes up to like 4.5 yards a carry. And you're like, this is fantastic. So it's a little bit misconstrued that way. So he sounds a little bit like Adrian Peterson, doesn't have the best of hands, but he's looking to be a north-south runner. He's not looking to make the big play. He's just looking to extend the chains, but he's capable of making a big play. So I don't mind Dalvin Cook. It's more of a let's wait and see how it works out with this offense, because Pro Football Focus does point out that he has fumbling issues, and we had that with Adrian Peterson, especially with this offensive line. If they don't produce, that's going to be something to look out forward to. But my question mark starts with Pat Elflein, and I get it. This has nothing to do with Pat Elflein and his talent. My issue with drafting Pat Elflein, because my whole thing is he was listed as a center, right? So I was like, wait a minute, he's a center? We don't need a center. We got Joe Berger. We have Joe Berger as our starting center. He's done great. Let's not forget that he had issues. He was on the bubble essentially every year for a while at the guard spot as a backup guard, because what happened? Every single year, he'd be on league minimum contracts, and then he moves to center, and then he's been great ever since. The issue that I have with drafting Pat Elflein is that, he could be a center or a guard. My thing is we have Joe Berger. Let's leave well enough alone. We don't need to do this. Every single year, the Minnesota Vikings get into this frenzy. Rick Spielman loves to just move players around and say, let's do carousel of dancing around, the chairs, dancing chairs. I forgot the name of that game. But basically, musical chairs, offensive lineman musical chairs. We'll move this offensive lineman here, this offensive lineman here. Next year we'll do this and this and this. That's what messed up, in my opinion. That's what messed up Brandon Fusco. Remember, before he got switched over to left guard and then right guard back over again, he was a pretty good, productive player for us. Not necessarily fantastic, but he was one of those guys that could give you average, competent offensive line play. Then what happened? We tried to get cute. Rick Spielman tried to get cute, move him over to left guard, and then he hasn't been the same since. Moved him over to right guard again last year. Say, he played right guard before. We moved him over to right guard again, and now he's out of a job, Brandon Fusco is. So my thing is leave Joe Berger alone, leave well enough alone. Because if Pat Elflein isn't necessarily as good at the right guard spot at the NFL level as he would be at center, then you're saying, okay, let's move Pat Elflein to center. Preferably you want him as a right guard. But if he's better at center, you're saying, okay, now we go back to square one, and hopefully Joe Berger can go back to right guard, but that's not necessarily guaranteed. We have little room for error in this offensive line. Who would I have taken instead? I would have taken Dan Feeney. Dan Feeney, according to Pro Football Focus, pretty good run blocker, excellent, and this is quoted on Pro Football Focus, excellent in pass protection when playing guard. Overall allowed only 2 sacks, 4 hits, and 19 hurries on 1,239 pass block attempts over the last 3 years, only penalized 10 times in 3 years. Going to Pat Elflein, right? We just mentioned those numbers he had in the last 3 years. Dan Feeney. Pat Elflein basically has the same numbers in last year's season alone with Ohio State. He's a very good run blocker, Pat Elflein is, but in pass protection, according to Pro Football Focus, pass protection was an issue at center and was not great at guard. Allowed 3 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, and 11 hurries in 2016 alone. Too many defenders fell off blocks when in pass protection. So he sounds like a much better run blocker no matter whether Pat Elflein is at center or guard, but he's questionable at pass protection. If you got Sam Bradford out there who's an injury away from getting hurt every single year, being out for the year every single year, it seems like, except last year, kudos to him for surviving with that offensive line. I don't know how he did that. I would think bolster up the pass protection. Dan Feeney isn't, can he play right guard or right tackle now? He played right guard and right tackle, at the University of Indiana, but his whole focus, he's best at guard. I would rather him come in as the right guard, which is what he played. He's a good pass protector. Let's see how he does in run blocking. But instead, they're going with the gambling, where I said Rick Spielman, he's very smart, but then again, he can try to get cute at times where he tries to outsmart the competition, saying, well, we'll move Pat Elflein to right guard. But if he's not a good pass protector and he's only good at run blocking, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to go back to the old style of just run the ball first and second down and then not necessarily do anything, try to get a third down completion, and that's how Sam Bradford keeps his completion percentage up? I don't get it. So let's see what happens with the Minnesota Vikings season. I don't understand how enough hasn't been done on that offensive line. The rest of the draft, you got a 5th round pick, 4th round pick, a bunch of projects in the 7th round. Not enough has been done. Right tackle, you've got T.J. Clemens and Mike Remmers competing for a right tackle spot. Not enough depth. We'll talk about NBA playoffs, mediocre at best, realistic Randy.
But take your time, cause if it's right, you feel the love come. There's just something in the world you cannot run from. Yeah, cause hurt people, not hard to love people. So evil, don't need you, I'm gone and won't see you. You wrong and I seen it. Nightmares, no dreaming, blocked and deleted. I'm feeling just so defeated.